Today we have a very special guest who recently graduated from electrical engineering program. Please welcome Dora. Dora, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you. My name is Dora, and as you mentioned, I just graduated university in electrical engineering. I did a minor in computer science, and I just left my job in 3D printing, and now I'm a developer. So as some might say, I've trickled over to the dark side, and I now work in programming, but I'm still involved with research at the University of Windsor.
Awesome, that's fantastic. And what influenced you to actually pursue electrical engineering in the first place?
That is a very long story with a bunch of twists and turns, so I'll keep it short and sweet. So I did engineering because I did robotics in high school, so I participated in FIRST Robotics, and I really enjoyed all aspects of it. I tried some mild coding, I did electrical, mechanical, and my mentors really pushed me to go for engineering. And as everyone who goes in engineering, I like my math and science. So that was why I chose engineering and electrical. I thought honestly I was going to be in environmental or mechanical. So I started in general engineering and then I ended up switching to electrical because I started getting interest in electronics. And then my mentor in high school was like, oh, go into electrical because then when you graduate, you can work electrical or mechanical jobs. But mechanicals have a little bit a harder time, supposedly, to work electrical jobs. So I thought electrical could keep my doors open. And then when I was supposed to graduate, I was like, shoot, I don't know if I want to work yet. I don't know if I want to do a master's. Let's just do a minor. So I stayed for 2 extra semesters and I did a minor in computer science. And then I ended up working in software. So
Oh,
it
that's
worked out.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And so how did you enter into the world of research and how did you ignite your passion for 3D printing and other I would say software development stuff?
That's a good question. Okay, I'll start with research. So, for anybody watching from the University of Windsor, they have a program called Outstanding Scholars, and I was very fortunate enough to apply and get into it. So, actually, funny story, I for OS, you can apply coming out of high school in your first year, and you get admitted to the program, you get a mentor, and you're not technically doing research yet, but it kind of kickstarts you. Then you have to reapply again in second year. I actually didn't apply in first year because I didn't think I was good enough to do it. Like I was all in my head, like second guessing, oh, I don't have the skills to do research, my grades aren't good enough, this and that. And luckily I had a mentor, aka my mom, the first ever most important mentor to me. She's like, just do it. You never know what's gonna happen. So I submitted my OS application about like remote underwater vehicle research because if I hadn't gone into engineering, I would have done marine biology, but I stayed in Windsor for elec eng. So yeah, I applied for OS, and that's honestly how it all started. I only interviewed with one professor. I was like, if I get this professor, it's going to be a score. It was Dr. Urbanik. Not only is she like heavily involved in the first community, but she does industrial manufacturing, 3D printing, all this advanced tooling, automation, soft robotics, which was stuff that I didn't know a lot about at the time, but I was super excited to learn. So yeah, we started with a soft robotics project. So at the time, she had a master's and a PhD student working on robotic grippers for picking and placing handling, and that has like fabric handling. So that has direct applications on assembly lines, for example. So if you're doing any kind of carbon fiber layups or fabric layups for like seats in your car interiors, any kind of molding. They currently have humans like pick and place all the fabric sheets. So she was designing grippers to kind of automate that process. So that's where the research started. And then COVID hit. Like after, I think it was like beginning of third year, COVID hit and we all went online. We all thought it was an extended weekend. I remember we were like, oh, we're just gonna have like 5 days off, and then we didn't end up coming back. So at that time, we moved our research meetings online and we started doing like hands-free door handles. So the like ergonomic extensions to door handles that would let you use like your wrist or part of your arm to open doors. And that's how I first pretty much my first shoe into CAD. So I started learning 3D modeling from that project and I did not know what I was doing. I didn't even touch CAD until second, third year, and electricals don't learn it in class. So it was something like very new to me that I was learning, but it was a lot of fun. I started on Rhino 6 for anyone who knows what that is. It's great for architecture and like designing things. It was kind of hard to learn CAD on that, but I moved to Fusion 360 and Inventor, which seeing into the future helped me get a co-op job in mechanical, which was super cool. Yeah, so COVID was when I started 3D printing. In 2020, I bought my first 3D printer, and honestly, the rest is history. Like, if you've seen like my YouTube videos or any of my posts, I really enjoy it. It ended up becoming a hobby, part of my research, and my job. Like, I worked so far, I guess you could say two jobs in 3D printing. And this goes in line with co-op internships that I think you might have a question for later. But first co-op my first co-op, I was supposed to work at Stellantis, and then COVID happened and it got canceled. So I worked like this graphic design co-op they had on campus, totally unrelated to engineering. So I'm glad they gave me the co-op credit. But yeah, my next co-op was at a local tooling place in Windsor, and they had a small 3D printing department. And it was such a great opportunity because I got to work with these like massive 3D printers. Like my bedroom used to be small, and that printer was like as big as my old bedroom. I think it printed like almost a meter cubed. So it was a really big volume. Then they had a few other printers by Stratasys, and then this one metal machine. So that co-op not only like showed me direct industrial applications of 3D printing, like designing for parts that go right on an assembly line that was like right outside of the room because that tooling place would do like a lot of robotic assemblies for Ford and other car manufacturers. So like when guys on the floor would break parts, they're like, "Oh no, we have a broken part. Can you help us?" And so our department would like redesign the part that they broke so that it was like better suited, which with 3D printing, you can improve designs and lightweight. So that's a lot of what we did. We made lighter and stronger parts for assembly lines, which was awesome. Um, a lot of the, do you have any questions about anything I said? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, that's actually very inspiring. And since you mentioned your YouTube channel, that actually brings me to the next question. So,
Mhm.
what inspired you to start your own YouTube channel?
I actually started a YouTube channel in 2016 and I've privated all of those videos because they're very silly. I used to make DIY videos, like do it yourself videos. And I guess that goes to show you, like, for a while, for like as long as I can remember, I've always like tinkering and making things with my hands. I'm a very physical learner. It's until I started that co-op in 3D printing that I wanted to start posting like more engineering type videos. One thing about me is I like a lot of different things. And by choosing like one major and settling for one minor, and like I felt very constricted by what I was learning in school. Like, obviously, you can take as many minors as you want. I could go back for another degree, but there's some things like electronics, like uh, things that you can do with hands-on projects that I can't necessarily learn in classes, like through labs and everything. So I'm glad I got my degree, but I started posting videos to kind of like explore the world of engineering, to tinker, to invent, and to share that with other people to kind of show them that you don't need to know everything to be able to try these new things to explore. You're okay to fail a lot. Failing is something that I do quite often, and they always say that you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And I highly attest to that. I've failed in my co-op, like I've made mistakes. I made mistakes at work. I make mistakes on the projects that I try. Like it's kind of like prototyping a version of yourself until you finally reach like who you want to be. So I've gone through many iterations of Dora, just like you would like iterating a part that you 3D print till you get to the final one, just like in product development, right? A lot of back end, obviously, battling stress, anxiety, stuff like that. Imposter syndrome is a really big one too. Being like being in such a fast-paced environment, you feel often pressured to keep up with everything that's changing, which is very hard to do sometimes. But going in, you need to know that you have to keep a mindset of problem solving, being open to trying new things and not like succeeding right away. And that will help you be successful in the long run.
And what was the primary reason? I mean, like, what was the primary, I would say, motive behind purchasing your 3D printer? Like, did you want to learn on your own how to learn different types of 3D printing and
Mhm.
like start printing your own models? And like, what was it like learning on your own? Like, what was your first day printing something using a 3D printer?
Another
Yeah, like,
another
how did it
good
look like?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to like connect the dots as to back where it went. I believe that honestly, I think I saw it online or one of my friends had a 3D printer and I thought it was the coolest thing. Like you're building something out of nothing. Like you make a model on your computer and your 3D printer like brings it to life for you. And so obviously I was so curious. I wanted to learn on my own. And we're lucky to live in an age where technology like that is affordable and accessible. I got a printer off Amazon. I started on the Ender 3, which is nothing fancy. And actually, I started printing parts for research. So while we were I printed some knickknacks here and there for the grippers we were designing. I'm not sure if you edit these videos, but I can send you photos if you want to include them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, I can do that. But yeah, I started like playing around with different designs for the grippers we were doing in research, and then like anyone does on their 3D printer, they print like random things they find online, little toys and that. And yeah, my first print failed. So what happened was I think the filament clogged. So that was my first experience with like filament breaking off the spool and clogging the printer. So my first ever print is a headless dog. It's like a half failed little dog. Yeah. Um, it was very interesting, the learning curve. So now we're lucky that there's so much information online that you can like Google on a subreddit. Oh, I have this problem. How can I fix it? So if you're worried about like, oh, what temperature do I have to print this material at? What material is the easiest for me to print? How should I design parts so they don't fail on me? How can I use less supports? Yeah, it was something that was so different and unique than anything I've seen before. Because my dad, he's a jack of all trades, I like to call him. He works a lot with his hands. So, but it's like more hand tools and power tools. So 3D printing was like this whole futuristic thing that I've never seen before. And I wanted to learn more about it. It was very different and challenging. So, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And now that you are more experienced with 3D printing, how is it different printing your own 3D models now?
I feel like it still is just as exciting for me. So usually when parts start printing, I'll like sit there and watch them. Uh, it was the same when I first started printing. Watching a 3D printer lay down the material is kind of like mesmerizing. It has this beauty behind it, almost you could say. And then like if I have a print running in the background, I'm very attentive to like when the printer starts making noises that it's not supposed to. I'm like, oh no, something's breaking, something's failing. Uh, yeah, and no matter how good you are at 3D printing, I feel like your parts still fail. You still experience like some kind of broken machine, some parts that are failing, clogging, and every time you kind of like scratching your head, I wonder what went wrong because there's so many different variables that can affect it. I can actually show you one of my funny last fails. To any of the Star Wars fans in the audience, this kind of looks like Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
But this is a fail that like completely like ripped off the bed and then it stuck to the extruder nozzle. And so it just kept printing the whole thing. And because it wasn't sticking to the bed, it just stuck to the hot end and we got this like worm looking thing. It's it's very nice to be able to come back to parts that are like fully finished, but every now and then I get like fails like that.
And what are some ways in which like you came back to those parts and like kind of overcome the challenge that led to like to their printing failing?
Mhm. Okay, so for this guy, I knew just by looking at it, well, the part didn't stick well to the build plate. And so there's a bunch of different strategies that you can do to fix that. One of them is being you could put some glue stick on your print bed. to help with the adhesion, you can print on top of painter's tape. And one more dangerous option that you have to be careful is using hairspray on your build sheet. Just make sure you're not like spraying it while it's like hot, because it, fire hazard. But yeah, so you can use some kind of other medium to help stick directly on the build plate, or you can closely watch the first layer that's being printed and make sure that it's actually sticking. So you can drop the height of your nozzle between the build plate to kind of squish the material extruding out a little bit better. Yeah, sometimes even too, it's how you design your parts. So it's not as big of a deal for using printing parts in PLA because PLA isn't a high temperature material. But if you're printing with things that get hotter, the hotter needs to be hotter to extrude them. If you print something that's like fully flat directly on the bed, what you'll tend to see is curling around the corners due to the heating and cooling of the material. So you can do anchor points in the support material. You can actually also add like a brim. So you can imagine a brim as like the brim of a hat almost. So, you know how you have that geometry that follows the contour of the hat? You can
Hmm.
think of that as the same thing on your part. It'll follow just like a brim of a hat around the part, and that'll help kind of pull it back to the build plate so it doesn't curl up. There still have been like fails I've had where I couldn't even guess what was wrong. Like, I'll show you one of these. This was a part I was trying to make a pen plotter, so I designed like a motor mount that would have a pulley in it as well for like a belt system. And I was trying a new CAD. I was trying Onshape because I graduated. So my free Fusion 360 license doesn't exist anymore. So I had to try a new CAD. But yeah, like my printer, I don't know how well you guys will be able to tell, but my printer like fully shifted midway through the print. So it looks like translated almost. So like it printed fine for the first few layers. So I'm like, okay, I left the room. And then the whole part like shifted almost 5 centimeters and then kept printing. And I have no clue why it did that. And my guess is the settings I was using, but I tried to recreate it and it didn't happen again. So I don't know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's always some kind of surprise when you least expect it. That's why when you print stuff on a deadline, give yourself a day or two at least, because stuff like this happens right before you need it, and then you run out of time.
Yeah, for sure. And what are the different co-op positions or
Oh, sorry, I
internships?
can't hear you right now.
Yeah, what are the different co-op positions
No, I
or
think my internet might be a little bit. Yeah.
um can you
Oh,
hear me now?
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are the different co-op positions or internships that you have done so far, which kind of gave you an idea that what you wanted to pursue after you graduated?
That's a good question. So I did only have two co-ops. As I mentioned before, the first one was in graphic design. And although I quite enjoyed that, I realized that graphic design might not be something I want to do like after as a full-time job. Although I do it for like social media on the side. That's enough graphic design for me. My co-op afterwards was at the tooling place in 3D printing. And actually, I applied to that co-op on a limb because I was like, oh, it's about 3D printing and I love that stuff right now. I want to apply. It was listed for a mechanical engineering position and the only CAD and 3D printing experience I had was like from research and from my hobby. So I applied and I got an interview which was awesome. So if that teaches you guys anything is to just go for it. You never know what's going to happen. You don't, I know some people are like, when they're applying, like, oh, I don't qualify for everything on the list, but you never know. You never know because, especially in interns and starting positions, they're very open to you still learning on the job. So if you show an affinity to learn new things and you seem somewhat knowledgeable on the topic, have some two-thirds of the application go for it. Yeah, so that's what I did. The cult was awesome. Like I said before, I got to work with machines that I never would have dreamt of like touching, and who even knew they were like right in town. So I didn't even have to travel very far to be able to work directly with industrial grade 3D printers and like doing applications, direct engineering applications for automation lines that would like fly across the states, which was crazy. My supervisor and boss, they were very awesome, and they how do I put this in words without using the same ones? Uh, they were very open to learning in the sense that they understood we were co-op students, and they give us every opportunity to explore how the different materials worked, to explore CAD. And yeah, my boss would give us a bunch of different side projects. So I remember making a two-part mold for casting silicone, for example. Um, we 3D printed these stencils and then rolled paint on them and used those to make custom t-shirts for his small business. What else did we do? We made these really complicated designs in CAD for this end of arm tool. So another direct application for 3D printing in automation is end of arm tools, so like robot grippers. And what you'll often see in assembly lines, especially robot arms that are moving quite fast to pick and place objects, are those with suction cups. So one thing 3D printing can be very useful for is creating internal channels in your printed parts so you don't have to worry about all the tubing for vacuums that go from the pump to the suction cup. So we like designed some sample models for end of arm tools that were fully 3D printed. And that was probably one of the most complicated 3D models I worked on, aside from the full assembly of a 3D printer I worked on my second co-op term. So I only did two co-ops, one in graphic design and one in 3D printing. And the 3D printing one, I stayed for my two last co-op terms. And I also worked part-time there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
I was very sad to leave that job, but you know when you know that it's time for a new chapter, it was kind of that
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
that sounds very interesting and sounds like you had a really great learning opportunity over those two co-ops. So now that you have graduated, where do you currently work at? And I would say like what's your typical like what does your typical day look like?
Okay, that is a good question. So I currently work in software. I work at a small business in Windsor called Manufacturing Solutions, Inc. And long story short, the we work in a software that is an extension to a CAM software. So a CAM software is typically used for any kind of machining operations. So we call that subtractive manufacturing. And the founders of this company said, oh, why don't we have something like this for additive, for 3D printing technologies? So they made an add on to this CAM software called Mastercam that lets users do hybrid manufacturing. So hybrid is the combination of traditional manufacturing and additive. So it's like 3D printing with all our milling, like CNC, stuff like that. So I work on that software, excuse me, called A plus. And recently I've been doing like some GUI changes and they put me on a project to so that software is mostly used for DED, so directed energy deposition, and that's metal 3D printing. My challenge recently at work was to get that software to work on the like smaller plastic printers that a lot of people have nowadays. So that's what I've been working on. I've been taking like the slicing aspect. So that software generates toolpaths, and toolpaths are exactly how they sound, paths that the tools follow to build your parts. And so, yeah, that software generates toolpaths for metal 3D printing. And I've been kind of adapting it for plastic 3D printing. So the reason why I like this job is it's a unique challenge. Not only is it programming, so I get to kind of improve my skills in that, but it's more of the math side of 3D printing instead of the application side, which I quite enjoy. And my day to day, it varies if I'm in office or if I work from home. I have I've had the lovely opportunity of finding a job that was hybrid, so I can kind of choose what I want it to be. My day usually consists of a cup of coffee, and then I sit down at my desk and I work on programming that needs to be done, like so whatever job we have open. So one thing I also enjoy about this workplace is we use a software for project management. So we break down all of our tasks in things we call stories. And stories go, if they're programming stories or bugs, they'll go through the programmer, the code reviewer, and then the tester. So I'll sit down and whatever I have for that day on the managing software, I'll complete. We have a daily meeting at 11, and then the rest of the day is just either watching a webinar, reading a research paper for certain projects, because some of them, some of them are related to topics that aren't like directly found in industry. So we got to delve into the research side to figure out what we're doing. Yeah, so it's a lot of using my computer. I invested in a pair of good blue light glasses because of that. But yeah,
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Um, so what are some future aspirations that you have, and like where do you imagine yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
I feel like that my answer to that question changes like every year. But I guess my answer to date would be I definitely want to go back to school. I think it's been like a couple months since I haven't been in school, and I always have this thing where when I'm not in school, I miss it, and then when I'm in school, I don't really miss it because it's stressful. But I'd like to go back for a master's degree, and I think I'll stay under the same professor I did my undergrad research in. I would like to do something in additive or 3D printing, but I would like to have it a more impactful application of it. So either exploring like a different technology of 3D printing, looking at inventing one, or finding something that has an application maybe in bio or the environment. So yeah, a nice part about this job is that still working in 3D printing, I kind of explore everything that's still out there. So going into a master's, hopefully in a year, I'll not only have continued research experience, but also industry experience. And I think that'll help give me a unique perspective for any grad studies. I did do engineering, so I'm looking to eventually become a professional engineer. I feel like it makes sense for me to pursue going all the way with this profession and do it the most authentic way I can. I have been volunteering with PEO, Professional Engineers Ontario, in our area. So, yeah, honestly, for now, probably a grad degree, PEng in the future. But yeah, I think I'll keep doing YouTube videos probably. It takes a lot of energy, but I quite enjoy it. It seems like a lot of people, like I've heard stories where people watch the videos and they're like, oh, wow, that was really cool. Your videos kind of showed me that not to be afraid to try new things. Yeah, and then they start asking me questions about things I've tried or like specific questions about projects they're doing and where they're stuck. And going into like 3D printing and everything during COVID, I didn't know a lot of people. I didn't really have that community who liked doing the same things I did. So I felt very alone in that sense. But, as I went through undergrad, as I started sharing more of the things I enjoy and volunteering in different clubs, I found those people, which was quite nice. It's really nice to find a community where you guys think alike, you challenge each other, you support each other. And I think that's really important too, especially as you move along through school, outside of school, is finding that support system, finding mentors that can really push you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's actually one of the perks of starting your own YouTube channel is it allows you to engage with your audience. And
Yeah,
yeah, it allows you to discover, I would say, some skills that you had, which you never knew about.
exactly. I mean, you know firsthand, like the channel you have been putting together is awesome. I've been thinking of doing an interviewing series on my channel, so I'll definitely be reaching out about tips. Maybe I'll have you on as a guest. But one suggestion, I guess, about your YouTube is have you ever made a video talking about your story?
No, I have never done that, but I think that's on my to-do list, but I'm just like waiting for like I'm just trying to craft my story even better, like to have I would say an inspiring story to tell.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, but if you need somebody to interview you, I can interview you.
Yeah, for sure. I will
But
think
I,
of it.
I definitely think that like putting your story online, what is there to lose? At the end of it, the reason why I enjoy doing that is not because I think like I'm that special. It's just, somebody commented on my video the other day asking how I decided what I wanted to do for school. And I sent them an answer and they said, wow, this actually really helps. It's more of just like, showing people that you're not supposed to have it all figured out and it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. What are some final advices you would like to give to students who are entering university and who are still deciding what major to pursue?
That's a good question. All right. So One thing going in that I was nervous about was that I had to settle for one thing. I had to settle for specifically one topic that I enjoyed, and that was it. It was one major, and that's it. You're focused on that, which isn't the case. You don't have to give up certain passions just to pursue a single one. So, like I said before, I liked a lot of different things. I was curious in mechanical, electrical programming. So the one way around that was I had research opportunity, I did a minor, I did personal projects, I volunteered in different extracurriculars. I really tried to put myself out there. So my advice would be find a major that you think you can get through, that you are comfortable enough pursuing for 4 years because it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be a lot of ups and downs. Find something you'll enjoy. So I like my math and sciences. I went with engineering. Now, if you have some arts that you're interested in, maybe a different kind of engineering, a different science, consider a relevant minor. Uh, there's also non-technical and technical electives in your classes, so you don't have to take something directly related to your degree. So my cheat code was doing a minor in computer science. I also did a minor in math, which is just one extra class in engineering, but you can take as many minors as you want. Research was a way I went into like soft robotics, mechanisms, materials, which was all stuff being taught in mechanical that I didn't learn. So I shoot into mechanical by doing undergrad research in OS. And even professors in general, they're super open to having students that aren't directly from the programs they teach. Like I knew some engineering students that did like psych philosophy research. So that's always an option. Personal projects are a great way to learn skills that aren't even relevant to what you're doing in classes, whether it's electronics, programming, woodworking. Um, yeah, you can take classes outside of school for that too. A big thing, as well as extracurriculars, like I was on the engineering society, part of the OS student council. Eventually, we made a women in engineering. Eventually, we made a IEEE group where we got some funding and built like a PCB fabrication lab on campus. So now, like capstone students go and make their circuit boards upstairs. They solder everything. Yeah. What I can say is, don't feel like choosing a major will cut off every opportunity, will cut off what you like. You don't have to pick just one thing. You don't have to settle for one passion. There's different ways that you can still, have those fixes um, throughout your undergrad. So I would say take advantage of the opportunities like minors, like research, like extracurriculars, and find people that will be able to support you through the struggles and through the journey, because that's really what undergrad is a journey. Yeah, it's getting your degree, which is an important part, but like you said, you're crafting this story, this version of yourself. And on that note, you said you were looking to craft the best version of yourself before you do your own interview. One thing I like, why I like posting is because I get to look at myself from a year ago and see where I was at. So even if you consider posting an interview of just you, in a year you could look back to like how things were, what your mentality was, and stuff like that. And documentation is another thing. Being able to document your journey into like becoming this person that you've always wanted to be.
Yeah, that's really a very great advice. Thank you for those insights and thank you for sharing your journey with us.
Yeah,
It's been
thank you for having me.
yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on my YouTube channel.